Hilchos Me'ila Perek Shmini, the laws of sacrilege, misusing consecrated items, chapter 8. This is it, the last chapter in this 8th book. The 8th chapter is the last chapter of the 8th book. We've been on this for about 3 months, more than 3 months, discussing the temple service and all the laws related to it. And on this special day, between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and it's also Vav Tishrei, it's the 6th of Tishrei, which is a special day in Chabad. It's the yahrzeit of the Rebbe's mother. The 60th yahrzeit, actually. She passed away in 1964. This is 2024. That year when she passed away, it was a Shabbos. And today it's just a regular Tuesday, but the Rebbe would always hold a farbringen to honor his mother. His famous Rashi Sichas, the talks examining Rashi's commentary on the Torah, began in her honor. Many initiatives related to women that are so familiar to Chabad today were done in her memory, and she was a very, very special woman. She helped her husband, Rabbi Yitzchak, in exile when he didn't have any paper or ink to write his Torah thoughts. She produced ink from herbs, and because of that, we have 5 volumes today of writings, notes of her husband, incredibly Kabbalistic and esoteric deep thoughts that the Rebbe expounded on later on. The Rebbe showed tremendous honor to his mother. And because of that, all the Hasidim as well do the same. There's farbringens today and the whole thing. And for us to be finishing a book of Rambam on this day, I think is a very, very special thing. So what is the last chapter of Me'ila about? 2 things, basically. First of all, it's going to be how workers deal with Me'ila. If people are working with hektish, or can you pay workers with hektish things? We're also going to talk about hektish in the Beis HaMikdash. How do you deal with Me'ila issues inside the temple? Can the Kohanim make use of stuff in the temple for their own use? Artisans who were constructing the temple, how did Me'ila work with that? And then, as the Rambam pretty much always does at the end of a book, he gives us something to reflect on, ethically speaking. It's going to be based on the concept of Me'ila, but it's going to be much more wide-reaching, the Rambam's perspective on how a Jew has to approach mitzvahs in general. So it's a short chapter, an easy chapter, and also somewhat compelling in its closing. It says the Rambam Halacha Aleph Hapoyalim Shehin Oisin Behektish. Workers that are working with hektish stuff. Now, we know in Torah there's a halacha that when a worker is working with produce, you must allow him to eat from that produce while he works. So that's A. You have workers that are working with hektish food. You would think they should be allowed to eat from the fruit. Furthermore, the Rambam adds, Afal Pisha Poskui Moen Mezainis. Even if hektish, who contracted these workers, even if they clearly decided that they're going to be responsible for feeding them, for giving them food, which is another reason why you would think that workers should be able to eat the food, says the Rambam, Lo yoichlu migregris shel hektish. They should not eat even dried figs of hektish. So here you have a guy working with figs. There's 2 reasons why he should be able to eat. A, he's a worker in general. B, hektish promised him food. You don't eat hektish food. V'im achlu ma'alu. If they eat, they've committed me'ila. Elo ha'hektish neisen lahem dmei mezainis. What should be done? Hektish should give them food. Should give them money for food. That you can do. But the food with which they're working remains as holy as ever and cannot be used if they do its me'ila. Halacha beis. It goes even further than human beings. We know with animals, there's a special halacha, a mitzvah in the Torah that says, Lo yisachsoim shor b'dishay. You cannot muzzle an ox while it's threshing. If an ox is threshing grain, you have to allow it to eat either from the grain or at least have a food bag that allows it to eat while it's threshing. Says the Rambam, that rule doesn't apply to hektish. Hadosh karshine hektish. If somebody is threshing fodder or grain that belongs to hektish, hareza choisem esapara. He must muzzle the cow. Shenemar, because the verse says, Lo yisachsoim shor b'dishay. Don't muzzle an ox in its threshing. Dayish haro iloi, threshing which is fit for the animal to eat. But this is holy. The animal cannot eat it. So you have to close the animal's mouth. It's the one time. And you don't let it eat from the hektish. Halacha Gimel, here's another interesting halacha when it comes to workers. Ein mechalalin es hahektish al hamalacha ella al hamois. You cannot transfer the holiness of something which is hektish onto work. You can only transfer it onto money. We've seen already a few times that if you need to transfer holiness from one coin to another, you can do that. or from an animal to a coin. Right? You pick up a coin, you say, wherever the holiness is, the holiness should transfer onto this coin. But transferring only works onto money. It doesn't work onto, let's call it ethereal concepts, like work. For example, ketzad. What does this mean practically? Uman sha'asa malacha behektish b'maneh. You have an artisan. He does work for hektish, the worth of a maneh, 100 silver coins. So you think, maybe now I can take something holy, transfer the holiness onto the work which he did, because he worked for hektish. And now let the object become mundane. Says the Rambam, no. You cannot pay him with an animal that belongs to hektish or a cloak that belongs to hektish for his payment and say, oh, you know what, let the holiness of this object be transferred onto the work that you did or the job that you did. No. You cannot pay him until you transfer the holiness onto money. You take the animal or the cloak, you say the holiness of the animal or the cloak goes onto the money. And then the achar she'asu chulin, after the animal or the cloak becomes mundane, you can give it to the artisan if you want as payment. And you can even buy back the animal from him from the trumas halishka. What is that? That's the coins that are put aside for the half shekel coins. We had this concept already in the laws of the half shekel coin. Basically, the half shekel coins were collected once a year. And every year, after the year was up, you had to buy sacrifices only from the new coins. So what if you had leftover animals in stock that are from last year's? So what you do is you transfer the holiness, you use it to pay an artisan, and then you buy it back from the artisan with the new money, and now you have new animals for sacrifices. So that's a mechanism you can do over here as well. You can pay the artisan with the animal and buy it back. But the first thing you have to do is you have to transfer the holiness onto money. You cannot transfer the holiness onto the job itself. And now talking about workers, the Rambam moves to the temple itself. A very interesting halacha that we don't think about very often. Keshebainin b'mikdash. When they initially built the holy temple. When they built the holy temple, so one could think that since they're building the holiest structure in the world, they probably made all the material hektish to begin with. Says the Rambam, no. Ein loikhin eitzim va'avanim min hektish. You don't buy materials. You don't buy wood. You don't buy stones from the hektish treasury. V'loi bainen asabinyan al das she'u kodesh. You don't build a building having in mind that it's holy. Ela bainen hakoil min hakoil. You build it all in its initial building stages from completely weekday or mundane materials. And you don't consider it holy till it's all built. Why? It's a decree. Maybe one of the workers is going to have benefit from the shade of the building, or he will lean on a stone or a beam during work. You always go by these construction sites and you see them, for lunch, they sit in the shade of the wall and they eat lunch, or they lean on a stone or a beam. Imagine if you're using hektish materials, then even while you're building, it's holy. You cannot make use of anything holy in a mundane way. So they built it all in a holy way. Then after it's all complete, you take money that belongs to hektish and you transfer the holiness of the money onto the building, and now the building becomes holy. Another law related to this: once the temple is already in session, if the treasurers see that the temple treasury needs wood, but wood just for today. The shipment is coming tomorrow, just for today they're out, they need some new wood. That's one exception where you can actually take hektish money and literally buy raw materials that are going to go right into hektish treasury. Why? They're not going to delay. So we should suspect maybe somebody will lean on them and commit me'ilah. They know it's only for today. So if you're bringing it in today, you can buy it with hektish money. Right away it becomes holy, and right away you put it to use for whatever wood is needed in the temple. Halacha hey, kishepoiskin im ha'umnin livnais b'mikdash uba azares. When the temple treasury used to decide a contract with the workers who were building the temple and the courtyards, so they would pay by the square foot. Today, how do you pay for a rental space? By the square foot. They would pay the workers based on how much they built. They would decide the contract that they were going to pay for so many and so many amas, for every cubit that you build, you're going to get this and this amount of coins. Yeah, like a contracting job. But in halacha, there are two types of amas. One cubit is 5 tefachs, 5 handbreadths. Another way to measure an amma is 6 handbreadths. So the Rambam says when they would decide the contract, they would use be'amma bas esrim etzba. They would use the smaller amma, the 20 finger breadth, which is 5 handbreadths amma. They would say every 5 tfachim, every 5 handbreadth amma that you build, you're going to get this amount of coins. But then, when they would actually measure how much they built, they would use the stricter measurement. They wouldn't pay them for every actual 20 handbreadths. They would measure 24 handbreadths. They'd measure a bigger amma, and for every bigger amma, yes,
square foot or whatever.
Exactly. For every bigger amma they would pay them, but there was a good reason. To prevent the workers from committing me'ilah. Because maybe today it's different because we have pretty much exact measuring tools, but they didn't have very, very exact measuring tools. So you would always want to err on the side of caution. If I'm going to pay you, and you really built less than an amma, and I'm going to pay you more money, you're taking hektish money, doesn't belong to you, and you're misusing it. So to be safe, we expand the amma, and we only pay you for a bigger amount of space, as though you built less. And then you don't get any extra money, and then you don't commit me'ilah in any way, shape, or form. Halacha vav, Tnai based in, the court made a stipulation, a special dispensation. Sheyiyu hakoyanim, that when the kohanim, when they eat the holy sacrifices in the temple, sheyiyu hakoyanim ne'oisin b'melach uva'etzim. They should be able to use freely hektish salt for spicing their food, hektish wood for cooking their food, ba'achilas karbanis sha'ichlin bechelkan, whenever they eat sacrifices as their portion. Avalo yitnu melach hamikdash b'chulin shalahem. They cannot take holy salt and put it in their own soup or whatever they're having as mundane stuff. If you're eating a sacrifice, the court says you can use whatever wood you want, whatever salt you want to go with your food. It's not me'ilah. Halacha Zayin talking about salt. So we learned already before in this book that there was different areas where they had salt. They had salt on the ramp of the Mizbeach as you walked up, so you can salt the sacrifices as needed. They had salt on top of the Mizbeach, so if you missed the ramp, you have more on top. And then they had, of course, the salt that ended up on the actual meat. So the Rambam says, Melach shal gabi ha'ever moyalin boy. Once the salt makes it onto a limb of meat, a limb of a sacrifice, it's fully holy, and there's me'ilah. The same way there's me'ilah on the actual sacrifice itself, salt also has me'ilah. Shal gabi ha'kevesh, shal resh ha'mizbeach, but the salt that's sitting on the ramp or on top of the mizbeach, ein moyalin boy, there's no me'ilah, because it's not holy yet. It's just sitting there as for potential later to use it on the sacrifice. But while it's just there, there's no me'ilah. And now the Rambam concludes the book with a thought on mitzvahs. Roi la'adam lihisbainin b'mishpetei ha'torah ha'kdosha. Halacha ches. It's befitting for a person to spend time contemplating the laws of the Torah, the Holy Torah, v'leida soifin yanam kifi koichai, and to know, to understand, to grasp the end of their significance according to your capability. In other words, you're supposed to examine mitzvahs. Torah gives you permission and gives you the commandment to look into the mitzvahs, at least the mishpatim, those are the ones that we know the reasons for, and try to get to the ultimate reasoning as much as you can to understand the mitzvah. Rabbi once said, this itself is an instruction of the Torah. In other words, if not for the Torah instructing us this, mitzvahs are so far beyond our grasp, they're totally infinite and divine, we wouldn't even be able to get anything of it. It's Hashem's kindness that He gave us a possibility to understand something of it, and therefore we have to understand something of it. But that's only true of those things which you can understand. We know we have mitzvahs in the Torah that are called chukim. We cannot understand them. So what happens when a person encounters that? Something, if a person comes across something in the Torah where he doesn't find a reason for it or a cause, al yihi kal be'einav. Don't let it be light in your eyes. Do not demolish the boundaries and ascend to God. In other words, think that you're equal to God in your understanding or lack of understanding of mitzvahs, pen yifritz by, because maybe Hashem will breach the boundary with you. This is a symbolic borrowing of the verse by Matan Torah where Moshe said, don't go up the mountain because Hashem might kill you. So basically, don't jump the gun when your brain when your small brain can't understand Hashem's mitzvahs. Don't let your thoughts about these mitzvahs be like your thoughts of any other mundane things. And here the Rambam draws the comparison to Me'ilah. Come and see how strict was Torah when it comes to Me'ilah. What's Me'ilah? Me'ilah means some object became holy. You have the lowest realms of reality. Wood, stones, dirt, ash. Once somebody, just verbally, puts the name of Hashem, the master of the world, on them, niskadchu, they become holy. Or Hashem. Anybody who behaves in a mundane way with them has committed sacrilege against God. Even if he does it inadvertently, he needs to have atonement. So if that's true of again, the most mundane things in this world, they can become so holy. How much more so the mitzvahs that are given to us by Hashem Himself. You don't get to treat it however you want. Don't just kick them. A person shouldn't just rebel against them because he doesn't know the reason. And he shouldn't whisper, or as the commentators explain, like think. You shouldn't think silently or secretly thoughts that aren't true about God. And again, do not think the way you think about mundane things with Hashem. And the Rambam demonstrates this concept from the Torah itself. It says in the Torah, actually in two places, you shall guard all of my chukim, that's the non-understandable mitzvahs, and all my mishpatim, and you shall do them. So look, the word chukaisai and mishpatai are in the middle, and on both sides you have shmira and you have asiyah. So the sages said, Amru Chachamim, our sages tell us, Litein Shmira va'asiyah lechukim k'mishpatim. The reason Hashem phrased it this way is so that the word guarding and the word doing should apply to both. As though you read it, Ushmartem es kol chukaisai ve'es kol mishpatai, comma, you shall guard all the chukim and mishpatim, but you could also read it, es kol chukaisai ve'es kol mishpatai va'asisem. All the chukim and the mishpatim you do. So the word doing and observing applies to both of them. What does it mean, observing and doing? V'ha'asiyah, you do it. Doing, we know what doing means. That's well known. It just means fulfill them, do the mitzvahs. The hashmira, but the observing, the guarding is in your mind. You should be careful about them. Do not imagine that they are any less than the mishpatim. They're equally as important as the mishpatim. What are the mishpatim? What are the chukim? It says the Rambam, mishpatim hina mitzvah shetaiman galoi. Mishpatim are those mitzvahs whose reasoning is revealed. And the goodness of doing them in this world is well known. Everyone can appreciate why honoring your parents. You give some examples over here. The prohibition of theft, murder, and honoring your parents. These are obvious. Society understands that if you don't have this, you have nothing. Those are mishpatim. The chukim are those mitzvahs whose reasoning is not known. The Rabbi once said, look, it doesn't say that there is no reason. It says the reason is not known. It means, of course, there's a reason. If you truly probe it, you can find some significance. Just we don't know it. Amru Chachamim, the sages said, Chukim chakaisilach, or chaktilach, ve'en lecha reshus laharer behen. I have made you chukim. You have no permission to think about them too much. But because of that, it's always challenging. The yitzre shel adam noikfei behen. The yetzer hara, the evil inclination of a person, throws doubts in him about them. Ve'umer sa'ila meshivin aleim. And the goyim, the nations of the world, they make fun of us for these things. Could go in Isur B'sar Chazir, like the prohibition of eating pork, Ubasar B'chalav, meat and milk, Ve'egla Arufa, chopping off the back of the neck of the calf when you don't know who murdered somebody, Upara Aduma, of course, the red heifer, the Sair HaMishtaleach, which we saw in this book, the goat on Yom Kippur coming up, sent away. How could you throw a goat off a cliff and that achieves atonement for a whole people? These are big deals. We don't understand them, and we get taunted for them. Look until him. Look how much King David had to endure pain and suffering from the heretics and from the Gentiles who would purposely debate him when it came to the chukim. But says the Rambam, the entire time that these goyim and heretics would chase David with fake comebacks, fake rejoinders, which they set up according to the shortness of man's knowledge. They make up these debates because they can't understand it any further. But the more they would throw at him, these challenges, he would add in clinging to the Torah. Shenemar, as it says, there's 2 verses in chapter 119 of Tehillim. It says, Taflu alai sheker zaydim. When the zaydim, the people that acted purposely against God, when they attached me lies, when they come to me with false claims, ani b'chol leiv etzer pikudecha. Me, with all my heart, I guard your commandments. The Nemar Sham Be'inyan, in the same topic, it says over there, Kol mitzvaysecha emuna. I know that all your mitzvahs are trustworthy. Sheker de dafuni. They're chasing me with falsehood. Ozreini, please help me. V'chol ha'karbanos kulan mikal ha'chukim hein. The Rambam adds even further, all the sacrifices that we're talking about this whole book, and by the way, coming the whole next book, which is actually called Sefer Karbanos, the book of sacrifices. You should know, says the Rambam, the entirety of sacrifices is part of the chukim. Now the Rambam doesn't put it in the original list because there are different types of chukim. There are chukim where you don't know anything about it, and then there are chukim where you can find reasons for the details but not for the general mitzvah. There's chukim where you can find details for the general mitzvah but not for the reasoning, not for the specifics. Different levels. So carbon is a different type of chukim. But the point is, a chayk needs to be done just as much as a mishpat. Amru chachamim, the sages said, Shabishvil avodas hakarbanos ha'olam ha'emet. The world stands because of the service of the sacrifices. And when we do, both the chukim and the mishpatim, those that are upright will merit the life of the world to come. And the Rambam adds, Torah even puts the chukim first, before the mishpatim. As it says, you shall guard my statutes and my regular laws, that a person does them and lives by them. As Chassidus always says it, you should do chukim with the same enjoyment that you do mishpatim, and you should also do the mishpatim with the same kabbalah sel, with the same acceptance of the yoke of heaven as you do the chukim. Brich Rachamana Desaya, and blessed is Hashem, who grants us assistance. And as we always do at the end of a book, Nigmar Sefer Shmini, V'hu Sefer Avoda, we've concluded the 8th book, the book of the service, Hilchos of Teisha, Uprakav Chamishta V'Tishim, 9 sets of laws, 95 chapters, over 3 months. The Elohein, and they are the following: Hilchos Beis HaBchira, Shmeina Prakim. The laws of the temple structure, 8 chapters. Hilchos Klei HaMikdash, the laws of temple utensils, Asara Prakim, 10 chapters. Hilchos Bias HaMikdash, Tisha Prakim, 9 chapters for the laws of entry into the temple area when you're not allowed to. Hilchos Yisurim Yizbeach, Shiva Prakim, 7 chapters for the laws of the sacrifices that are forbidden to be offered on the altar. Hilchos Maseh HaKarbanos, Tisha Asar Prakim, 19 chapters for the sacrificial procedures. Hilchos Tmidinu Musafin, Asara Prakim, 10 chapters for the daily and additional services in the temple. Hilchos Psulei HaMukdashin, Tisha Asar Prakim, 19 chapters for disqualified sacrifices. Hilchos Avodas Yom Kippurim, Chamisha Prakim, 5 chapters for the laws of the Yom Kippur service. Hilchos Me'ilah Shmeina Prakim, 8 chapters for the laws of sacrilege. And with that, we conclude the 8th book. Mazel Tov for concluding the book of Avodah.